The script. On New Year's, I called my son 16 times. When he finally answered, he said, "Did you send the transfer yet?" On New Year's, I called my son 16 times. When he finally answered, he said, "Did you send the transfer yet?" The silence that followed those words was more painful than any shout. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you, for even 1 second, feel like this sounds familiar, I only ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me continue to vent. It was December 31st in Dallas, Texas. It was 6 in the evening. And I, Carol Peterson, had the table set with my grandmother's heirloom china, that same blue and white set that had seen so many family dinners, so many celebrations where love was breathed in between the steaming dishes and the grandchildren's laughter. I had put on my navy blue dress, the one I saved for special occasions. My hands were slightly trembling as I adjusted the silverware for the 10th time. The golden turkey was cooling in the kitchen, stuffed with the recipe my mother taught me when I was barely 20 years old. The aroma of rosemary and thyme floated throughout the house, mixing with the smell of the cinnamon candles I had lit to create that warm atmosphere I loved so much. I was 68 years old when all this happened. 68 years of giving everything for my family, especially for Robert, my only son. The house was silent, but it was an expectant silence. I had prepared the mashed potatoes and gravy that my grandchildren loved. I had bought the gifts I knew would make them jump with excitement. I had even taken out their grandpa's old guitar, thinking that maybe we could sing the songs we used to play when Robert was little. The clock showed 6:30. I picked up my phone with hands that already showed the spots of age, those same hands that had worked tirelessly for decades to give my son everything I never had. First call, straight to voicemail. "Hello, my love. I just wanted to know if you're on your way. Dinner is ready and the kids—" I hung up. Maybe he was driving. Second call, voicemail again. Third, fourth, fifth. On call number 8, I started to feel that knot in my stomach that mothers know so well. That gut feeling that tells us something isn't right. I looked out the window onto the paved street of my neighborhood, hoping to see the lights of his black BMW, the car I had helped pay for when he said it was an investment for his future. Call number 10. I had started pacing the living room, my slippers making a soft sound against the ceramic tile floor I had chosen thinking of my grandchildren, so they wouldn't get hurt if they fell while playing. On the wall, the photographs looked at me from their golden frames. Robert at 5 years old, losing his first teeth. Robert graduating from high school, with that smile that melted my heart. Robert on his wedding day, elegant in his black tuxedo, while I cried with happiness in the front row. Call number 13. My fingers were already trembling as I dialed. Call number 14. Anxiety was tightening my chest. Call number 15. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "Dear God," I whispered. "Let them be okay." And then on call number 16, when the sun had completely set and the neighbor's Christmas lights shone like small stars in the darkness, he finally answered. "Hello?" His voice sounded annoyed, impatient. "Robert, my love." My voice came out cracked with relief. I was worried. Are you okay? Are the kids okay?" A silence that lasted forever. "Did you send the transfer yet? Or are you going to keep messing everything up all day?" The world stopped. I literally felt as if time had frozen. Those words fell upon me like stones, each syllable heavier than the last. "Robert." My voice was barely a whisper. "Today is New Year's Eve. I didn't call for money. I prepared everything you like. The turkey with your grandmother's recipe. The mashed potatoes. I even bought that brand of wine that we already ate. he interrupted me coldly. And we're not coming. I'm with important people, with real investors. Don't embarrass me by calling like a lunatic. But Robert, the children, you promised that. The kids are better off here. They don't need to see a... He stopped, but I knew what he was going to say. A click. He had hung up. I stayed there, standing in the middle of my living room, with the phone still stuck to my ear, listening to the dial tone that sounded like a lament. My legs trembled, and I had to sit down on the armchair where I used to rock him when he was a baby, where I read him stories when he had nightmares, where I comforted him every time the world hurt him. The table was still set. The candles were still lit. The turkey was slowly cooling in the kitchen. And for the first time in my life, I understood the meaning of the absolute silence of loneliness. That night, as I blew out the candles one by one, I didn't know that my son had been planning something for months that would completely destroy me. I didn't know that my estate, my savings, my dignity, everything was about to become part of his personal fortune. The only thing I knew was that the tears running down my cheeks tasted of all the love I had given, and that, apparently, it had never been enough. My grandmother's china remained untouched that night, but something inside me had broken forever. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen, with a cup of chamomile tea cooling between my hands, looking at the photographs stuck on the refrigerator with magnets. Each image screamed a different story at me, a story of sacrifice that Robert seemed to have completely forgotten. There was the picture from when he turned 15. I was working then as a secretary in a government office during the day, and at night I sewed sweet 16 dresses for families in the neighborhood. I remember that time as a blur of permanent dark circles and fingers pricked by needles. But Robert wanted a party like the one he had seen at his rich friend's house, and I gave it to him. I sold my gold earrings, the only valuable jewelry I owned, an inheritance from my mother. With that money, I hired a hall, a band, and even a 3-tier cake. Robert shone that night, receiving congratulations from all his friends on the great party his mum had thrown for him. But I couldn't buy a new dress. I wore the same black dress I had had for 5 years, washed and ironed until the fabric looked like paper. It's worth it, I told myself as I watched his smile. Everything is worth it for that smile. My eyes stopped at another photograph. Robert at 18, holding his college acceptance letter. What the photo didn't show was that I had pawned my wedding ring to pay the tuition. My wedding ring, the only tangible memory I had left of a marriage that, although it had ended badly, represented a time when I believed in happy endings. Robert's dad had left us when the boy was barely 4 years old. He left with a younger woman, leaving me a note on the kitchen table that said, "I'm not cut out for this. It's better this way." We never saw him again. He never sent $1 for child support. Robert grew up asking me where his dad was, and I always told him, "Your dad is working very far away, but you and I are an invincible team." How naive I was. During those college years, Robert studied business administration. He always talked about how one day he would have his own company, that he would make a lot of money in the stock market, that he would invest in real estate like the entrepreneurs he admired. "Mum," he would tell me while I ironed his shirts for his presentations, "someday you're going to be rich. I'm going to buy a big house where you never lack anything." I believed him. I worked double shifts to pay for his books, copies, and projects. There were days when I only had coffee for breakfast, so he could have lunch in the university cafeteria with his friends. I didn't want him to feel less than anyone. I didn't want him to carry the shame of being the poor scholarship kid. I remember one December afternoon. Robert arrived thrilled. He had met a girl in college, Sarah, the daughter of a textile mogul. Mum, he said, she's perfect. Her family has factories, houses, even stock in several companies. And the best part is, she likes me. My heart boiled with joy for him, but also with a fear I didn't know how to interpret then. Sarah came from a world of wealth that I didn't know, a world where mothers didn't work in government offices or sew at night. The first time he brought her home, I had cleaned for 3 days straight. I bought flowers, prepared turkey pot pie from my grandmother's recipe, and used the good china. Sarah was elegant, educated, but I noticed how her eyes scanned our small living room, how she looked at the curtains I had sewn myself, how she forced a smile when I showed her pictures of Robert as a child. "Your house is very cozy," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. That night, after they left, Robert told me, "Mum, when Sarah and I get married, you're going to have to get used to a different kind of life. Her family is very sophisticated." Sophisticated. That word was burned into my mind like a brand. When he graduated, I got a loan using the house as collateral to give him the money for a graduation trip to Europe. Robert wanted to see Miami, Los Angeles, and New York City. "It's a cultural investment," he explained. "Successful businessmen need to have worldly knowledge, know different markets." The loan was for $20,000. At that time, my monthly salary was $800. I had to pay that debt for 5 years, working overtime, sewing late into the night, selling baked goods on weekends at the park. But Robert came back radiant, full of stories about museums, expensive restaurants, and luxurious hotels. "Mum, someday I'm going to take you to all those places. I promise you." 3 months later, he announced that he would marry Sarah. The wedding was a production worthy of a magazine. Her family took care of almost everything: the country club garden, the banquet for 300 people, the band, the flowers, the photographer. I only had to pay for my dress and contribute $5,000 for minor expenses. $5,000. I had to ask for a salary advance and sell my sewing machine, the same one I had used to make so many dresses to pay for his studies. On the wedding day, I sat in the front row, dressed in a blue suit I had bought at a thrift store. During the ceremony, I heard Sarah's family quietly comment on the economic situation of the groom's family. One of her aunts murmured, "Poor Robert, hopefully this will help him get ahead." Get ahead, as if everything I had done for him wasn't enough to already consider him someone who had gotten ahead. The first years of marriage were good. Robert got a job at an investment firm. He started earning well. He visited me every 2 weeks. He brought me flowers. He told me about his plans to make a fortune with stocks and bonds. "You'll see soon, Mum. I'm going to be a multimillionaire." When my first grandson, Jason, was born, I felt like my heart multiplied by 2. That baby was the light of my eyes, the most beautiful gift life had given me. I took care of Jason while Robert and Sarah worked. I took him to his first doctor's appointments. I sang him the same songs I sang to his dad. 2 years later, Olivia, my precious granddaughter, was born. With her, my happiness was complete. I had a family. I had purpose. I had love. But something gradually began to change. The visits became less frequent. When I called, Robert was always busy with important meetings or analyzing investments. Sarah started suggesting that the children needed more intellectual stimulation, insinuating that my house wasn't the right environment for them. Carol, using my first name instead of calling me mother-in-law, like before. The children need to be in environments that prepare them for the future, activities that develop their potential. What she was really saying was that my house, my love, my care were not enough for her children. Robert began asking me to borrow money, small amounts at first. "Mum," he'd say, "an incredible investment opportunity came up. I only need $2,000 for a month. I promise I'll pay you back with interest. He never paid me back $1, but he kept asking for more. I'm setting up an imports business. I just need initial capital. I found some stocks that are going to skyrocket. Sarah wants to remodel the house, and we need a bridge loan. I always said yes. I always found a way. I worked until I was 65 so I could continue helping him. Even when I retired, my modest pension continued flowing into his urgent investments. The last photo on the refrigerator is from before Christmas. Robert, Sarah, and the children posing in front of an enormous Christmas tree in what looked like an expensive hotel lobby. They were all smiling, dressed in clothes that probably cost more than my monthly salary. I wasn't in the picture. I had sent them money for the children's Christmas presents just 2 weeks before the photo was taken. Looking at that image, I finally understood the truth that had been staring at me for years. I was no longer Robert's mother. I was his personal ATM, his emergency fund, his financial safety net. And apparently ATMs are not invited to Christmas dinner. I got up from the table, put the photos in a box, and for the first time in decades, I went to sleep without praying for my son's happiness. That night, I dreamed that I was the one who hung up the phone. The days after that New Year's Eve were like walking through an emotional minefield. Every small detail of my daily routine reminded me how invisible I had become to my own family. The silence of the phone was deafening. Before, even if it was to ask for money, Robert called me every 2 or 3 days. Now, nothing. January 15th was my 69th birthday. I woke up early, as always. I made my coffee and sat in the kitchen waiting. For years, Robert had been the first to wish me a happy birthday, sometimes calling me at 6 in the morning with some excuse like, "I wanted to be the first, Mum." 6 o'clock passed. 7, 8. At 10 in the morning, my neighbour Hope knocked on the door with a small, homemade 3-layer cake. "Happy birthday, Carol. How are you going to celebrate?" I smiled at her, trying to hide the wound in my chest. "Oh, you know, Robert will probably call me later." Hope looked at me with that expression that mature women know so well, that mixture of compassion and knowledge that says more than 1,000 words. The whole day passed. My phone never rang. At 11 at night, when I had already put on my pajamas and was about to go to bed, I received a text message from Robert. Not a call, a message. "Happy birthday. Sarah reminded me. We're very busy with the new business. I'll call you later." Sarah reminded me. My own son needed his wife to remind him of his mother's birthday. That night, I cried until I fell asleep. But they were tears of rage, not sadness. 3 days later, I found out something that chilled my blood. I was at the Walmart supermarket, doing my usual shopping, when I ran into Patty, a woman who had worked with me at the office years ago. After the usual greetings, she told me something I didn't expect. "Hey, Carol. I saw your Robert at the Galleria Mall over the weekend. He was buying very expensive clothes at Macy's, loaded down with bags. But what caught my attention is that he was accompanied by a young woman. It wasn't Sarah. And they looked very affectionate." My stomach churned. "Are you sure it was him?" "Completely. I even thought about saying hello. But they were very focused on their shopping. The girl must have been about 25, very stylish. Robert was buying a handbag that must have cost a fortune." I arrived home trembling. I took out my phone and looked up Robert's Instagram profile. There it was. Photo after photo of a luxurious life I didn't know. Robert in expensive restaurants, Robert in 5-star hotels, Robert showing off his new Rolex, Robert posing with wine glasses that probably cost more than my monthly pension. But what hurt the most were the photos with her. Miranda, her name was. 26 years old, according to her profile. fashion design student. In the photos, she appeared wearing jewelry that I immediately recognized. They were Sarah's, the diamond earrings that Sarah had inherited from her grandmother, the pearl necklace that Robert had given her for their 5th wedding anniversary, and in a more recent photo, Miranda was wearing a ring that took my breath away. It was my engagement ring, the one I had pawned years ago to pay for Robert's college. He had gone to get it back without telling me anything, but not to give it to me, to give it to his mistress. The caption read, "When you find something valuable, you don't let it go. Fortunate investment, worth it." Investment. He had called that girl an investment. I couldn't eat dinner that night. I sat in my armchair, the same one where I had rocked him as a baby, and tried to process what I was seeing. My son had not only abandoned me emotionally, but he was destroying his marriage, cheating on Sarah, and using family valuables to impress a young girl. And all with the money I had been sending him religiously every month. On February 2nd, I decided to do something I had never done. Show up at his house unannounced. I needed to see my grandchildren. I needed to understand what was happening. I needed to confront this nightmare my life had become. I took the bus to their gated community in Dallas, Texas. The house was beautiful, 2 stories, with an impeccable lawn and 2 cars in the driveway, Robert's BMW and a Mercedes-Benz SUV I didn't recognize. At the entrance, there was a brass plaque that read, "Peterson Harrison family," as if they were a business dynasty. I rang the doorbell. Sarah opened the door, and for the first time, I saw her without makeup, with swollen eyes and disheveled hair. She looked like she had been crying. "Carol," she said in a dull voice, "what are you doing here?" "I wanted to see the kids. It's been more than a month since I saw them." Sarah looked back, as if looking for help. "It's not a good time. The kids they're confused lately." "Confused about what?" An awkward silence followed. Sarah leaned against the doorframe and sighed deeply. "Carol, did you know that Robert has another woman?" The world crashed down on me, not because of the confirmation of something I already suspected, but because of the way Sarah asked me, as if I were an accomplice to my son's betrayal. I just found out. I saw it on social media." Sarah laughed bitterly. "On social media? How modern, right? I found out when I found the credit card statements. Do you know how much he's spent on that woman in the last 6 months? More than $30,000. Hotels, restaurants, jewelry, designer clothes. $30,000. A fortune for someone like me." "Where does he get so much money?" I asked, though I was already afraid of the answer. "From you," Sarah said, looking me straight in the eye. "All the money you send him, everything you lend him for his supposed investments, he's spending it on keeping that girl." I felt dizzy. I had to lean against the wall so I wouldn't fall. "But there's more too," Sarah continued. "He put the house up as collateral to get a loan for $200,000. He says it's for a Bitcoin import business. But I know it's a lie. That money is also being spent on her." "And the kids?" "The children don't ask about their dad anymore. Jason told me yesterday that he prefers Dad not to come because when he's here, everyone yells. Olivia has started wetting the bed again. It broke my heart to imagine my grandchildren living through that tension, that uncertainty." "Sarah, I didn't know any of this. If I had known—" "Carol," she interrupted me, "I know it's not your fault, but I need you to know something else. Robert told me that you can no longer continue sending him money because you are losing mental faculties. He says that when you die, he's going to inherit your house, and that will give him the capital he needs for his businesses." The blood froze in my veins. "What did you say?" That he's planning to take your house. He says he already talked to a lawyer about how to get you declared mentally incapacitated. The world fell apart at my feet. My own son. The boy I had carried in my arms all night when he had a fever. The young man whose college I had paid for by selling my jewelry. The man I had called my hero on his graduation day. He was planning to steal my only economic security. And not only that, he was willing to destroy my reputation, to make me out to be a crazy, senile old woman to justify the theft. "Carol, are you okay?" Sarah asked, alarmed by my pallor. "No," I told her with an honesty that surprised even myself. "I'm not okay, and I think for the first time in my life, I'm going to do something about it." That night, I returned home with a determination I hadn't felt in decades. I sat in front of my vanity mirror, the same one where I had gotten ready for so many special occasions, hoping to make Robert proud. And I truly saw myself for the first time in years. I was 69 years old, but my eyes still shone with intelligence. My hands, though wrinkled, were steady. My mind, despite the pain, was clearer than ever. Robert could call me crazy all he wanted, but he was about to discover that this crazy woman still had a few cards left to play. And this time, I was going to be the one setting the rules of the game. The first test of my new determination came just 3 days later. It was Friday morning when my phone rang. Robert. My heart still skipped a beat when I saw his name on the screen, but this time something had changed inside me. "Mum, I need you to transfer $5,000 to me today," he said, without even greeting me. His voice had that urgency I knew so well, the same as always when it came to money. "Good morning, Robert," I replied with a calm that surprised even myself. Yes, good morning. Did you hear what I said? $5,000. It's urgent. I have an investment opportunity in cryptocurrency that I can't miss. It's like buying stocks when they're cheap." For the first time in decades, instead of asking him how I would get the money, I asked him something different. "What is it for exactly?" There was a silence on the other end of the line. "What do you mean, what for?" I just explained. "Cryptocurrency. Bitcoin. Don't you understand finance?" "I understand more than you think," I told him. "I understand that you need money to support Miranda." The silence this time was deafening. I could hear his accelerated breathing through the phone. "What are you talking about?" "Your 26-year-old girlfriend. The $30,000 you've spent on her. My engagement ring that you gave her. Do you want me to continue?" "Mom." His voice changed completely. It became soft, manipulative. "I don't know what they've told you, but everything has an explanation. Sarah is very upset lately. She invents things." "I saw the photos on Instagram myself, Robert. Those photos don't mean anything. Miranda is... she's a business associate. We are developing an investment project together. An investment project that requires you to buy her jewelry and take her to luxury hotels." "Look, Mum." His tone turned cold, threatening. "I don't know who is putting ideas into your head, but you're starting to sound like a paranoid old lady. Maybe you need to see a doctor." There it was, the first threat, the first time he insinuated that I was losing my mind. "I don't need to see any doctor, Robert. What I need is for you to stop lying to me. You know what? Forget it. I don't need your money. I have other resources." And he hung up. I stayed seated with the phone in my hand, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel devastated by his rejection. I felt liberated. Not even 2 hours passed when my phone rang again. This time it was Sarah. "Carol, please tell me you didn't send Robert any money." "I didn't send him anything. Why?" because he just got home in a fury. He's yelling that you betrayed him, that you're damaging his businesses. He says that you turned against him. Sarah, I just told him the truth, that I know about Miranda. Oh, Carol. Now he's worse. He's talking on the phone with someone, mentioning something about accelerating the legal process. I don't know what he's talking about, but it sounds serious. The legal process. He had already started pulling strings to have me declared incapacitated. That afternoon, while I was preparing dinner, an unexpected visitor arrived. It was Sarah's mother, Mrs. Harrison, an elegant 75-year-old woman who had always treated me with courtesy, though never with real affection. "Carol, we need to talk," she said when I opened the door. I let her in and offered her coffee. Mrs. Harrison sat in my living room with the rigid posture of someone who has come to do business. Sarah told me what's happening, about Robert and that girl. "It's a very difficult situation," I replied, not knowing exactly where the conversation was going. "Carol, I've come to ask you a favor. Robert is a confused man, but he is still the father of my grandchildren. That girl has him infatuated, but that will pass. It always passes." "What are you asking me, Mrs. Harrison?" "To continue supporting him financially, at least for now. If you cut off the money, he will look for more drastic ways to get it, and that could hurt Sarah and the children more." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even Sarah's mother wanted me to continue financing the destruction of her own daughter. "Mrs. Harrison, with all due respect, I am not going to continue paying for Robert to support his mistress." Her expression changed completely. The courtesy disappeared from her face. "Carol, you don't understand the situation. Robert has important connections in the business world. He manages million-dollar investments. If this becomes public, if he runs out of capital, it will affect the whole family, including my grandchildren." "Your grandchildren are being affected by Robert's behavior, not by my decision not to finance him." "Look, Carol." Mrs. Harrison leaned forward with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We all know that you are no longer young, that sometimes you forget things. Maybe it would be better for Robert to manage your finances, for your own good." There it was again, the insinuation that I was losing my mental faculties. "Mrs. Harrison, I think it's time for you to leave." "Carol, don't be stubborn. This can be easily resolved if you cooperate." "Get out of my house," I said, standing up. Mrs. Harrison slowly stood up, with the offended dignity of someone who is not used to being told no. "You are going to regret this decision, Carol. My family has resources, contacts. It is not smart to go against us." "Your family may have many things," I replied as I escorted her to the door. "But it doesn't have my dignity. That is still mine." That night, Sarah called me crying. "Carol, Robert took the kids. He says they're going to stay with him until I come to my senses. I don't know where they are." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean he took them?" "He arrived with two men he said were his business partners. He packed Jason and Olivia's things. And he told me that he wasn't going to let the children live in an environment of female hysteria, that both you and I were acting irrationally." "Did you call the police?" "I can't. Technically, he is their father. It's not kidnapping. But Carol, the kids were scared. Olivia was crying. Jason asked me if they had done something wrong." I couldn't sleep that night. The image of my grandchildren scared, confused, being used as pawns in Robert's manipulative game broke my heart. But it also filled me with a fury I had never felt before. The next day, Saturday, Robert appeared at my door. He was accompanied by a man in a suit who introduced himself as Mr. Thompson, his lawyer. "Mom, we came to talk to you," Robert said with a fake smile, "to resolve this misunderstanding." There is nothing to resolve, I replied without inviting them in. Carol, the lawyer intervened, we understand that you are going through a difficult time. It's normal at your age for older people to become suspicious, distrustful. Robert only wants to help you. I don't need help. Mom! Robert put on his sweetest voice, the one he used when he was a child and wanted something. Look, I know things have gotten complicated, but we are all family. We can fix this. You just need to sign some papers that will give you financial peace of mind for the rest of your life. What paper is that? The lawyer opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. It's a power of attorney that would allow Robert Judd to manage your finances. That way you wouldn't have to worry about anything. He would take care of everything, so I wouldn't have to worry about anything because I wouldn't have anything, I replied. Robert became impatient. Mom, don't be dramatic. It's for your own good. You're no longer at the age to be handling money or making complicated financial decisions. The only complicated financial decision I've made lately is to stop giving it to you, I told him, looking him straight in the eye. Robert's mask fell completely. You know what, Mum? This can be done the easy way or the hard way. We can do this easily with your cooperation, or I can initiate a legal process to demonstrate that you no longer have the mental capacity to handle your own affairs. Are you threatening me? I'm giving you options, he said, with a coldness that chilled me to the bone. Then my option is for both of you to leave my house. Right now. Robert stepped closer to me, and for the first time in my life, I was afraid of my own son. Mum, you don't understand who you're messing with. I have connections, I have resources, I have money. I can make your life very difficult. Robert, I said with a voice that I didn't recognize as my own, firm and clear. For 69 years I have lived without threatening anyone. I have worked honestly. I have loved sincerely. I have given everything I had without expecting anything in return. But if you want war, you are going to discover that your mother still has a lot of venom to spit. They left without saying another word. But in Robert's eyes, I saw something that scared me more than his threats. I saw that I was no longer his mother. I was his enemy. And that night, as I closed all the windows in my house and double-checked that the doors were tightly locked, I knew that the real battle was just beginning. On Monday morning, after a night in which I barely closed my eyes, I made the most important decision of my life. I dressed in my best suit, the navy blue one I saved for special occasions. I put on my makeup carefully and left my house with a purpose I hadn't felt in decades. My first stop was the bank. Good morning, Mrs. Peterson, the executive greeted me, a young man about 30 years old who had always been very kind to me. How can I help you? I want to close the joint account I have with my son and open a new personal account. I also want to change all the beneficiaries on my investments. The young man looked at me in surprise. Are you sure, Ma'am? Those changes are significant. I am completely sure. Over the next hour, I signed paper after paper. I closed the account where Robert had free access to my savings. I changed my online banking password. I cancelled the automatic transfers I had scheduled to send him money monthly. I removed his name as a beneficiary of my retirement savings account. Is there anything else I can do for you? The executive asked when we finished. Yes. I want you to place a security alert on all my accounts. If anyone other than me tries to access information or make changes, I want you to call me immediately. I left the bank feeling as if an enormous weight had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in years, my money was truly mine. My second stop was the law firm, Miller and Associates, which I had found in the phone directory. The receptionist, A woman my age with kind eyes showed me in immediately. Mr. Miller was a man around 50, grey-haired, with the serious look of someone who had seen a lot in his profession. "Tell me, Mrs. Peterson, how can I help you?" I told him everything, from Robert's threats to the documents he had tried to make me sign. The lawyer took detailed notes, nodding occasionally with expressions of increasing concern. "Ma'am, what you are describing to me is a clear case of financial family abuse. But I need you to understand something important. Your son has probably already initiated the process to have you declared incapacitated. We need to act fast. What do we need to do? First, I need you to have a complete psychological evaluations with a certified expert witness. That will give us official evidence that you are in full possession of your mental faculties. Second, we are going to draft a new will where your decisions regarding your estate are very clear. Third, we are going to request a restraining order so that your son cannot approach you. A restraining order against my own son? Mrs. Carroll, I know it's difficult, but your son is threatening you, intimidating you, and trying to steal your estate. That is not filial love. That is a crime. That afternoon, I left the office with a folder full of documents and an appointment for the psychological evaluation the next day. But more importantly, I left with something I hadn't felt in months: hope. When I arrived home, there were 3 missed calls from Robert and 2 voicemail messages I didn't bother to listen to. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I disconnected the landline phone. For the first time since New Year's Eve, I ate dinner peacefully. I made a plate of chicken pot pie, poured myself a glass of the wine I had saved for special occasions, and put on some music. I didn't wait for calls. I didn't watch the phone. I didn't worry about whether Robert needed something. I simply existed for myself. That night, for the first time in months, I slept 8 full hours. On Tuesday morning, I went to the office of Dr. Eleanor Vance, the forensic psychologist Mr. Miller had recommended to me. She was a woman around 40 years old, professional but warm, who made me feel comfortable from the first moment. "Mrs. Carroll, we are going to perform a series of evaluations to determine your cognitive and emotional state. The process can take about 3 hours. Do you feel prepared?" "Doctor, I have been preparing for this for 69 years without knowing it." The exams were exhaustive. Memory tests, logical reasoning, reading comprehension, handling of mathematical and financial concepts, questions about my personal history, my family relationships, my recent decisions. In the end, Dr. Vance looked at me with a smile. "Mrs. Carroll, you have the clearest mind I have seen in months. Your cognitive functions are perfect, your judgment is excellent, and frankly, your emotional strength after everything you have been through is admirable." "Does that mean what?" "That means any attempt to have you declared incapacitated would be fraudulent. You are in perfect condition to manage your own affairs." I left the office with an official document that certified my full mental capacity. It was like having a shield against Robert's lies. That afternoon, while I was organizing my important papers on the dining room table, the doorbell rang. I expected it to be the mailman, but when I opened the door, I found an unexpected surprise. It was Jason, my 12-year-old grandson. He was alone, with his school backpack, and his eyes were red as if he had been crying. "Grandma," he said with a broken voice, "I ran away from Dad's house. I don't want to be there." I hugged him immediately, feeling as if my heart was going to break from pure love and worry. "My boy, what happened? Where is your sister?" "Olivia is with the new nanny Dad hired. But Grandma, everything is wrong in that house. Dad yells all the time on the phone. There is a young lady who lives there now. and she treats me like a nuisance. And he broke down saying it. Dad says horrible things about you and Mum. What kind of things? He says you went crazy and that Mom is hysterical. He says you two are ruining his life. But I know it's not true, Grandma. You're not crazy. You're the smartest person I know. I hugged my grandson with all the strength I had, feeling the tears run down my cheeks. In the midst of all the betrayal and pain, this 12-year-old boy reminded me who I really was. Jason, my love, does your dad know you're here? No. I told the nanny I was going for a walk in the park, but I came on the bus. Grandma, can I stay with you? I don't want to go back there. My boy, of course you can stay, but we have to call your mum so she doesn't worry. When Sarah found out Jason was with me, she rushed over. The mother and son reunion was so emotional that the three of us ended up crying and hugging in my living room. Carol, Sarah said, I need to get out of there too. Robert has become dangerous. Dangerous how? He physically threatened me yesterday when I told him I wanted a divorce. He told me that if I tried to take the children away from him, he would destroy me financially, that he has contacts in the courts that can make them take away custody from me. Sarah, I said, taking her hands, I've already started to defend myself. I have a lawyer. I have proof of my mental capacity. And tomorrow I'm going to request a restraining order. If you want, you can come with me. We can request a family protection order. For the first time in months, I saw hope in Sarah's eyes. You would do that for me, after everything that happened, after my family also pressured you. Sarah, you and the children are the victims here, just like me. Robert is hurting all of us. It's time for us to defend ourselves together. That night, Sarah and Jason stayed to sleep at my house. I made makeshift beds in the living room. We made popcorn, and we watched a movie like in the old days. Jason fell asleep nestled against me on the couch, and for the first time in months, I felt like I had a real family. Not a family based on bank transfers and emotional blackmail, but a family based on true love and mutual support. The next day, Sarah, Jason, and I went to the courthouse together. We presented our requests for protection orders, handed over all the evidence we had gathered, and gave our testimonies. The judge, an older man with a serious expression, carefully reviewed all the documents. Mrs. Peterson, he finally told me, it is evident that you have been a victim of financial family abuse. The restraining order is approved. Your son will not be able to approach you within 200 yards, and any attempt to access your bank accounts or properties without authorization will be considered a crime. We left the courthouse with official documents that protected us legally, but more importantly, we left with the certainty that we had taken the first step toward our freedom. That evening, as Sarah helped Jason with his homework at my dining room table, and as I prepared dinner for my new makeshift family, I realized something fundamental. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for the phone to ring asking for money. For the first time in years, my house felt like a home, not a bank. And for the first time since New Year's Eve, when I looked toward the future, I didn't see emptiness. I saw possibilities. The storm arrived on Friday afternoon. Jason was doing his homework at the dining room table, and Sarah was making coffee in the kitchen when the doorbell rang insistently. It wasn't the polite ring of a normal visit, but the aggressive sound of someone who wanted to enter by hook or by crook. When I opened the door, I found a scene that would have been comical if it hadn't been so pathetic. Robert was there with a small army, Miranda clinging to his arm like an expensive accessory, Mrs. Harrison with an aristocratic expression of fury, Mr. Thompson with his briefcase full of useless papers, and two muscular men they had obviously brought to intimidate me. Mum, Robert said, with that fake smile he had perfected over the years. We came to resolve this misunderstanding once and for all. There is nothing to resolve, I replied without moving from the doorframe. And I didn't invite you in. Carol, Mrs. Harrison intervened with her most condescending tone. Let us in. We came to talk like civilized people. Civilized people don't come with thugs to intimidate 69-year-old ladies. Miranda, who until that moment had remained silent, stepped forward with the arrogance of someone who believes that youth gives them special rights. Ma'am, you are causing a lot of unnecessary problems. Robert only wants to help you, but you are acting like a hysterical lunatic. The silence that followed those words was deafening. Even Robert looked uncomfortable. Excuse me, I said with a calm that surprised even myself. What Miranda means, Robert began. No, I interrupted him. Let her explain exactly what she meant. Miranda looked at me with contempt. That you are interfering in Robert's life. He has important plans, investments that could make him a millionaire. And you are behaving like a selfish old woman who doesn't want to let go of control. Investments that could make him a millionaire, I asked. Like the ones he's been making with my money for months. Miranda's face changed completely. She looked at Robert in panic. Robert, you told me that money was yours, that you had an investment fund. Of course it's mine, Robert said quickly. My mother gives it to me voluntarily for my projects. Voluntarily? I laughed bitterly. Like when you threatened to declare me crazy if I didn't give you more money. Mr. Thompson stepped forward with his briefcase. Mrs. Carroll, we have come to make this easy. These documents will give you complete financial peace of mind. Robert will take care of everything. You will receive a fixed monthly payment, and you won't have to worry about anything else. A monthly payment from my own money, I clarified. How generous. Mum, Robert changed his tone to a more aggressive one. This is going to be done one way or another. We can do it here, now, without drama. Or I can proceed with the lawsuit for mental incapacity that I have already initiated. The lawsuit you already initiated? I took the prepared documents out of my purse. The psychological evaluation, the restraining order, the lawyer's report on the fraudulent process Robert had tried to initiate. Are you referring to this lawsuit? I asked, showing the papers. The one that was dismissed because the psychological evaluation you presented was done by a doctor who is not certified to perform forensic evaluations. The one that was rejected because the judge determined that it was filed with fraudulent documentation. Robert's face turned completely pale. How did you get... I managed to defend myself from your attempt at theft, I finished his sentence. Very easily, Robert. It turns out that when you are 69 years old and have a lifetime of experience, you learn to recognize when someone is taking advantage of you. Mrs. Harrison stepped forward furiously. Carol, you can't do this. Think about the children. Think about the family. The family, I laughed. What family? The family that abandons me on New Year's Eve? The family that uses my money to support mistresses? The family that tries to steal my house? Sarah appeared in the doorway behind me, with Jason by the hand. Robert, Sarah said, with a voice I had never heard from her, cold as ice. You came for Jason, right? Well, here he is. Ask him if he wants to go with you. Robert looked at his son with that manipulative smile he used when he wanted to get something. Jason, son, let's go home. Your dad misses you. Jason hid behind me. I don't want to go with you, Dad. You yell all the time in your house, and that lady, he pointed to Miranda, she told me that children like me get in the way of important adults. Miranda turned red as a tomato. I never said that. Yes, you did, Jason replied with the brutal honesty of children. You also said my grandma was a ridiculous old woman who didn't know when to die. The silence that followed those words was absolute. Even the thugs Robert had brought seemed uncomfortable. Jason is lying, Miranda said desperately. 12-year-old children don't lie about things like that, I replied. 12-year-old children repeat exactly what they hear. Robert was visibly losing control. Fine, that's enough, he shouted. I am not going to tolerate this disrespect. I am your son. You owe me everything. And there, in that phrase, Robert finally revealed who he really was. I owe you everything? I asked with a calm that contrasted with his hysteria. Robert, let me explain something that you apparently never understood. I don't owe you anything. I gave you everything, out of love, because you were my son. But apparently you were never my son. You were just my creditor. Mom, don't be dramatic. Dramatic? I took out my phone and found the screenshots I had taken of his social media. Is this dramatic? I showed him the photos of him with Miranda wearing my engagement ring, spending money on expensive restaurants that he asked me for medical emergencies. Is this dramatic? I took out the bank statements that my lawyer had obtained, where it was clearly seen how the money I transferred to him went directly to hotel and jewelry expenses. Is this dramatic? I took out the false documentation he had presented to have me declared incapacitated, where he had falsified my signature and that of 2 witnesses. Robert, I said, looking him directly in the eyes. For 69 years, I believed that a mother's love was unconditional. Today I discovered that a son's love apparently does have a price, and I can no longer pay it. Miranda, seeing that her entire facade of million-dollar investments was crumbling, exploded. Robert, you told me your mother was rich. You told me she had a fortune in real estate. You told me that when she died, we were going to inherit millions. Robert tried to silence her, but it was too late. No, Robert. I left my boyfriend for you. I quit my job because you promised me a life of luxury. And it turns out you're broke and your mum lives in a middle-class house. The mask had completely fallen. There was the truth. Robert had not only been stealing from me, but he had lied to Miranda about the magnitude of my fortune. Miranda, I told her with a smile, let me give you some free advice. Men who steal from their mothers also steal from their girlfriends. It's only a matter of time. Mrs. Harrison, seeing that the situation had completely spiraled out of control, tried to regain command. Carol, this is ridiculous. We all make mistakes. Robert will apologize. You'll fix things, and we'll move on as a family. No, I said, with a firmness that surprised me. We are not going to move on as a family, because it turns out that family is not the people who share your blood. Family is the people who respect you, love you, and would be with you even if you didn't have a dollar. I looked at Sarah and Jason, who were holding hands behind me. This is my family now. Robert approached me with an expression I had never seen on his face. Pure rage. Mom, this is not going to end here. I'm going to fight this legally. I'm going to prove that you're senile, that Sarah is manipulating you, that— Robert, I interrupted him, and my voice sounded different. It wasn't the voice of the pleading mother I had been for decades. It was the voice of a woman who had discovered her own strength. For 35 years, I bought your love with my money. I paid for your studies, your whims, your mistakes, your lies. I thought that if I kept paying, someday you would truly love me. But today I understood something. Real love cannot be bought, and fake love is not worth buying. I took my house keys from my purse and showed them. These keys open the door to my house, a house that I bought with my work, in which I live with my dignity, and you are no longer welcome here. You can't do this. Of course I can. The restraining order says you cannot approach me within 200 yards. You are violating a court order. Do you want me to call the police? Robert looked at me with a mixture of disbelief and hatred that broke my heart, but also liberated my soul. You are not my mother, he said with venom. You're right, I replied. Your mother died on New Year's Eve when you hung up the phone without saying I love you. I am Carol Peterson, and Carol Peterson doesn't owe anyone anything. They left without saying another word. Miranda crying, Mrs. Harrison furious, Robert with that expression of defeat that would have made me pity him at any other moment of my life. That night, as Sarah, Jason, and I ate dinner peacefully in my kitchen, I realized something. For the first time in decades, I was not afraid of the future, because I had learned the most important lesson of my life. When you stop buying love, you discover who truly loves you. And it turns out that I had more real love than I had ever imagined. 3 weeks after the final confrontation, I woke up one morning with a feeling I hadn't experienced in decades: curiosity about my own future. It was a Saturday in March. The sun was coming through my bedroom windows, and for the first time in years, I didn't have a mental list of worries waiting for me when I opened my eyes. There were no pending transfers to make, no anxious calls to wait for, no guilt gnawing at my stomach for not having given enough money, time, or love to someone who had never valued it. I got up, put on my cotton blue house robe that I had bought for myself the week before, not because it was on sale, but because I liked it. And I went to the kitchen where Sarah was already making coffee. "Good morning, Carol," she said, with that genuine smile that had replaced the constant tension of the last few months. "Did you sleep well?" "Like a baby," I replied. And it was true. Since Robert had left my life, my nights had become peaceful. No nightmares about legal threats or worries about what new financial emergency he would invent the next day. Jason appeared in the kitchen with messy hair and that morning energy that only children who feel safe in their home have. "Grandma, can we go to the farmer's market today? I want to buy ingredients to make my online cooking teacher's chili." My online cooking teacher says it is important to know traditional recipes. Jason had started taking cooking classes online, something he never would have been able to do at Robert's house, where any interest that was not related to making money was considered a waste of time. "Of course, my boy. But first, I have a surprise for you." Sarah looked at me curiously as I took a manila envelope out of my purse that I had been keeping like a small treasure. "Remember I told you about my friend Hope, the neighbor? Well, it turns out her sister has a guest house in Maui, Hawaii, that is available for 2 weeks in April. She is lending it to me." Sarah almost choked on her coffee. "Carol, are you talking about vacation?" "I'm talking about real vacation. Beach, sun, fresh seafood, and most importantly, time for Jason to see the ocean, and for you to relax while I learn to do something I never did in my life." "What is that?" "Live for myself." That afternoon, while Jason selected chili peppers at the market with the seriousness of a professional chef, Sarah and I walked among the flower and craft stalls. There was something magical about that normality, about being able to walk unhurriedly, without the constant weight of being available for Robert's emotional or financial crises. "Carol," Sarah told me as she examined some silver earrings, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course, my girl." "Don't you miss anything from before? Don't you feel sad that Robert is no longer part of your life?" I stopped next to a flower stand where an older lady was selling gladioli and roses. The woman was my age, maybe a little older, and she worked with that quiet dignity of someone who has found their place in the world. "Sarah," I told her as I bought a bouquet of yellow sunflowers, "simply because they made me happy. For 35 years, I cried for the son Robert never was. I cried because I hoped that someday he would become the loving and grateful man I had raised. But 3 weeks ago, I understood something. I wasn't losing my son. I never had the son I thought I had. What do you mean? That the Robert I loved existed only in my imagination. He was an idealized version that I had created because I needed to believe that all my sacrifice had been worth it. The real Robert, the one who threatened me, lied to me, and tried to steal my house, he was always there. I simply refused to see him. That night, after having the chili that Jason had prepared with my help, and which had turned out surprisingly delicious, I decided to do something I had been putting off for years. Call my cousin Linda in Nashville, Tennessee. Linda and I had been like sisters as children, but we had gradually lost contact when I became completely focused on raising Robert, and she moved out of state. Carol, my goodness, I can't believe it's you. Her voice on the phone sounded exactly the same as 20 years ago. Linda, I know it's been years, but it doesn't matter. Where have you been? How is Robert? How are the grandkids? I told her everything. Everything. From New Year's Eve to the final confrontation. Linda listened to me without interrupting, with that patience and understanding that only women who have lived long enough to understand that life can be incredibly cruel and surprisingly redemptive at the same time can give. Carol, she said when I finished my story, do you know what I find most incredible about this whole story? What? That you sound happy, really happy. In all the years I knew you raising Robert, I had never heard you sound like this. She was right. For the first time in decades, when I spoke of my life, there was no undertone of complaint, worry, or justification. I sounded like a woman who had found peace. Linda, can I ask you something? In all these years that we didn't talk, did you ever think about calling me? Many times. But every time I asked about you to other relatives, they told me you were very busy with Robert, that he absorbed all your time and energy. They gave me the impression that there was no room in your life for anything else. That revelation hit me like a bucket of cold water. I had not only lost Robert by giving him all my time and attention, but I had lost other family relationships in the process. Linda, do you think it's too late to start over? Carol, you're 69, not 99. Of course it's not too late. The following Monday, I made a decision that filled me with an emotion I hadn't felt since my 20s. I signed up for tap dancing classes at the community center. The instructor was a woman my age named Rose, who had been a professional dancer in her youth and now taught ladies like me who wanted to reconnect with their culture and their bodies. Carol, Rose told me after my first class, where I had stumbled more times than I had danced. Have you danced before? Only at my wedding, 30 years ago, and at Robert's graduation party. And since then? Since then, I've been too busy being a mother. Rose looked at me with that immediate understanding that only women who have lived similar experiences have. Well, now it's time to be busy being Carol. That afternoon, while I was practicing the basic steps of the shuffle and tap in my living room, something that would have seemed ridiculous to me a month ago, Sarah arrived from her job with important news. Carol, I got the job at the downtown boutique. The salary isn't much, but it includes commissions. And the owner says that if I prove I can handle the administrative part, there are possibilities for growth. Sarah had been looking for work since she decided to divorce Robert. She wanted economic independence, not just emotional. That is wonderful, my girl. And Jason? Jason can stay here with you after school if you don't mind. He says he prefers to do his homework at your table than anywhere else. If I don't mind, I laughed. Sarah, having Jason here makes me feel like I have a real purpose, not like before, when my purpose was to be Robert's personal bank. That night, after helping Jason with a project on American history, I sat in my living room with a cup of chamomile tea and looked at the photographs I had on my shelf. I had decided to put all of Robert's photos in a box, not out of resentment, but because I needed my space to reflect my new life. In their place, I had put new photos. One of Sarah, Jason, and me at the market, smiling like the strange but genuine family we had formed. One of my dance classmates after our first successful recital. A selfie that Jason had taken of me the day I bought my first smartphone, where I was laughing because I didn't know how to use the front camera. In those photographs, I saw a woman I recognized, but at the same time seemed new to me. A woman with wrinkles that spoke of a life lived, not constant worry. A woman with eyes that shone with real joy, not the forced smile I had maintained for years to hide my sadness. The phone rang, interrupting my reflections. For a second, my heart raced with the old panic of, what does Robert want now? But then I remembered, Robert no longer had my new number. It was Linda. Carol, I have a crazy proposition for you. Tell me. Next month there's a family reunion in Nashville. Cousins that we haven't seen in decades will be there. Aunts that we thought we would never see again. Do you feel up to coming? You can bring Sarah and Jason. There's room for everyone. A family reunion, the possibility of reconnecting with people who had loved me before my world, was exclusively reduced to satisfying Robert's needs. Linda, you know what? Yes, I'm going to go. Seriously? Seriously. In fact, I'm going to bring my new tap dancing outfit, and I'm going to show them what I've learned. Carol, I can't believe you're the same shy woman I knew. I'm not the same, I told her. And saying it, I realized the depth of that truth. That woman sacrificed so much for others that she lost herself. I am of the one who remained when I learned to say no. That night, I fell asleep thinking about Maui, about the family reunion, about my dance classes, about Sarah's economic independence, about Jason's smile when he cooked. I thought about everything I had ahead of me, instead of everything I had lost behind. And for the first time in my adult life, the future seemed more interesting than the past. 6 months later, I am sitting on the terrace of the guest house in Maui, Hawaii, watching the sunset while Jason builds sandcastles and Sarah reads a novel under the umbrella. The sound of the waves is different from everything I had heard before. It's not just noise. It's like a constant conversations between the ocean and the shore, a dialogue that is never interrupted and never repeats exactly the same. It has been almost 7 months since that New Year's Eve that changed my life forever. 7 months since I discovered that true love is not what you give, but what you allow yourself to be given. 7 months since I learned that saying no does not make you a bad person. It makes you a person with boundaries. Sarah has flourished in her work. Last week, she told me that the owner of the boutique offered her a partnership to open a second branch. Carol, she told me with that emotion that only women who discover their own power have. I never thought I could be a businesswoman. I always believed that my only talent was being a wife and mother. Because that's what they told you to believe, I replied. But women are much more complicated and interesting than they have taught us to think. Jason is in first place in his class. His teacher told me that he is a completely different child from the one she met at the beginning of the school year. Before, he was anxious, distracted, as if he was always waiting for something bad to happen. Now he is curious, participatory, happy. It is incredible how children thrive when they live in homes where love does not come with conditions, where adults are not constantly in crisis, where emotional stability does not depend on bank transfers or emotional blackmail. Yesterday afternoon, as we walked along the boardwalk in Maui, Jason asked me a question that broke and healed my heart at the same time. Grandma, do you miss Dad? I stopped next to one of the bronze sculptures that adorn the boardwalk and looked him in the eyes. He was 13 now, old enough to deserve an honest answer. Jason, do I miss the dad I thought was your dad? I miss the man I imagined I had raised. But that man never really existed. And the real dad? I don't miss the real dad, my boy. Because the real dad hurt me. He hurt you. And he hurt your mum. And when someone constantly hurts you, missing them would be hurting yourself. Jason nodded with that premature wisdom that children who have lived difficult situations develop. You know what I like most about living with you, Grandma? What? That I'm never afraid that you're going to get mad if I don't do something perfectly, and that I never wake up wondering if today is going to be a bad day. Those words confirmed something I had been suspecting. My decision to distance myself from Robert had not only saved me, but it had saved my grandchildren from growing up in a toxic environment that would have marked the way they relate to the world forever. This morning, while having coffee on the beach watching the sunrise, I received a text message from a number I didn't recognize. For a moment, my heart raced thinking it might be Robert using a new phone to contact me. But when I opened the message, it was something completely different. Mrs. Carroll, it's Miranda. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to tell you something. I was about to delete the message without reading it completely, but something stopped me. Maybe curiosity, maybe the need to completely close that chapter of my life. Robert and I broke up 3 months ago. You were right. Men who steal from their mothers also steal from their girlfriends. He took my savings, my car, and even the jewelry he had given me. It turns out everything was bought on credit, and he had never paid anything. He left me with debts for more than $20,000. But I'm not writing to you for you to feel sorry for me. I'm writing to apologize and to tell you something you need to know. You were the strongest woman I have ever met in my life. When I saw you confront Robert that afternoon, when you told him you were no longer going to buy love, I understood what real dignity was. I'm 26 years old, and I had no idea that a woman could be so brave. My own mother always taught me that we had to put up with everything for love, that our worth depended on how much sacrifice we were willing to make for the men in our lives. You taught me that true love doesn't hurt, that true respect is not begged for, and that a 69-year-old woman can be more rebellious and freer than a 26-year-old girl. Thank you for that, and I'm sorry for being a part of your pain. I showed the message to Sarah, who read it with an expression of surprise. Are you going to answer her? I already did, I said, showing her my reply. Miranda, forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not the person who hurt you. I forgive you because I no longer hold a grudge against anyone. I hope you learn to value yourself as much as I learned to value myself. Be very happy. That afternoon, as I watched Jason teach Sarah to build more elaborate sandcastles, I thought about everything that had changed in these months. My tap dancing classes had become a real passion. Rose had invited me to join a group that performs at cultural events in the city. Carol, she told me, you have a natural rhythm that cannot be taught, and a joy on stage that is contagious to the entire audience. My relationship with Linda had become as close as in our youth. In fact, we are planning a trip together to Spain next year. It's never too late to fulfill dreams that you postponed for others, she had told me, when I confessed that I had always wanted to see New York City. My health had improved remarkably. Without the constant stress of Robert's financial crises, without the permanent anxiety of being available for his emotional emergencies, my blood pressure had normalized. I slept better, and I had regained the appetite I had lost during the last years of the toxic relationship with him. But the most important thing was something less tangible. I had regained my curiosity about life. I had enrolled in an online art history course. I had started reading novels again. I had adopted a stray cat that now lived in my garden and gave me more unconditional love in a day than Robert had in an entire year. When night came and the stars began to appear over Maui, Sarah approached and sat next to me on the sand. "Carol, can I ask you a very personal question?" "Of course, my girl." "Do you ever regret it? Do you ever think that maybe you were too harsh on Robert? That maybe you could have worked things out?" The question came to me like an ocean breeze, refreshing and necessary. Sarah, for 68 years of my life, I believed that being a good mother meant sacrificing everything for my son. I believed that my love had to be unconditional, even when his clearly wasn't. I believed that if I kept giving, 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 I would eventually receive even a little bit of genuine love in return. And now? Now I understand that unconditional love for a son does not mean unconditionally accepting his abuse toward you. That being a good mother is not raising a child who believes he deserves everything without giving anything. That teaching someone that they can treat you badly without consequences is not love. It is complicity in your own destruction. I looked toward the horizon where the sea met the sky, two infinities that touched without losing themselves in each other. Sarah. If I had continued to allow Robert's abuse, he would never have learned that his actions have consequences. He would have continued hurting all the women in his life, including you and future partners. He would have raised Jason and Olivia thinking that toxic dynamic was normal. By setting boundaries, by walking away, I not only saved myself, I saved all of you too. Jason ran up to us, his hands full of seashells he had found on the shore. "Grandma, look what I found. They're all different, but they're all perfect." I took one of the shells and examined it. It had irregular shapes, uneven colors, small imperfections that made it unique. "You know what, Jason? That seashell reminds me of our family. We are not the traditional family that appears in movies. We are not perfect, but we are real. We are honest, and we love each other without conditions." "Without conditions. Without conditions." "Ouch," I confirmed. "That means I'm going to love you the same whether you get an A in math or if you fail. I'm going to love you the same whether you decide to be a chef, an astronaut, or a street sweeper. My love for you does not depend on what you do for me, but on who you are." That night, after Jason fell asleep and Sarah went to read in her room, I stayed alone on the terrace, looking at the stars and reflecting on the emotional journey I had lived in these months. Last year, on this same date, I was a woman who lived waiting for crumbs of affection, who confused love with sacrifice, who believed that her worth depended on how much she could give without receiving anything in return. Today, I am a woman who knows she deserves respect, who understands that true love is reciprocal, who has learned that saying no is an act of self-love, not selfishness. Last year I lived for Robert. Today I live for myself. And paradoxically, that has allowed me to be better for the people who truly love me. Tomorrow we return to Dallas. Sarah has an important meeting with investors for her new boutique. Jason has his end-of-year school play where he plays a historical figure. I have my tap dancing performance at the community center. We have plans. We have hopes. We have a future. And all because I learned the most important lesson of my life. When you stop begging for love, you discover that you already had it in places where you never knew to look. But before completely closing this chapter of my life, I want to say something to you who have listened to me this far. Have you ever felt like you give and give without receiving anything in return? Have you ever confused loving with enduring? Do you know someone who is living what I lived? If so, I want you to know this. You deserve love that doesn't hurt. You deserve respect that you don't have to beg for. And you deserve relationships where your worth does not depend on how much you are willing to sacrifice. Tell me in the comments, have you lived something similar to my story? Or do you know someone who has been through a similar situation? If you identified with my story, if you feel that these words came at the moment you needed to hear them, leave me your like and subscribe to the channel, because these stories need to reach the people who need to hear them most. Sometimes the story of a 69-year-old woman who learned to say no can be exactly what someone else needs to start saying yes to their own life. And remember, it's never too late to start living for you.